I'm Tom Bowling, and I'm here to share with you Pioneer Imports and Wholesale, a beautiful composition. And one of the things I think you'll notice that when you go through Pioneer Imports catalog is that you will see that all of their collections have a name. It identifies a group of product. And I think that's a super marketing tip for us as retailers to take back into our store and use that concept of give it a name. And there's no sense in borrowing, there's nothing wrong with that. Borrow the names. There's no sense that we have to create everything something new and different. So this collection here is actually called Refreshing Retreat. And so I'm going to begin by taking this grouping of materials, and this is where it's really important that we cut at an angle. Our stemming. And the reason that we cut at an angle is to allow that to pry into the floral foam and hold it in place, to help hold it in place by the physical tension that we've done by cutting that angle into the floral foam. Now, something heavy like the delphinium here, I'm actually going to dip and put a little bit of my pan glue right on the bottom of the stem and do the insertion. So that helps hold and secure that in place. Not every time do I use the liquid or the pan glue, but in this case where I've got a little bit more of a substantial weight at the top, I want to make sure that I do that. Now, I've removed this piece of delphinium, but that leaf is just too close to the insertion point. So I'm going to remove that, not throwing it away, because I want to make sure that I use all the materials that I have paid for. So you'll notice that I put the first two in kind of in a parallel grouping, not one here and one over here, because that's going to look like antenna. But this way they join together physically and visually. Now you'll notice that the grass that we chose to use, this was the whole bush, I've taken away 3 out of that. So I'm going to use that, but I'm not throwing these away. I'm going to set those aside and use those in another composition fairly soon. So let's look at the grass material. And again, getting that good and deep into the dry foam that I'm using here. Cutting, making sure that I have a good sharp angle down at the bottom. This time I am going to glue. Put a little bit of glue on here, and then my third one, and you can see that I've already taken and curled those pieces of onion grass. And what I'm doing is an interpretive parallel composition. So I'm putting groups of material in parallel lines. Now it's not pure because there's not exactly the same amount of space in between each insertion, so that's why I call it interpretive parallel. So I want to use this material to get a strong vertical impact. And we know those lines that are vertical give us the stability. Think of buildings in a city, and that's a great way to look at it. And then I do have that one little piece of onion grass that we took apart. And you know what? I'm going to bring that over to the opposite side here, just to pull that texture and that line over and introduce it just ever so slightly. All right, so we're going to do some basing. And as we know, basing is creating interest at the growth level, at the base of our composition. So I've taken those hydrangea, and we saw that in an earlier video where we actually went in and dissected and cut out pieces. And if you do that, you need to make sure that we remove every evidence. That means all those little stubs that were in there now have to come out, so our customer doesn't go, oh, what was there? We don't ever want them to think what was, it's what is. And so whatever little bits and pieces that we have here, now you can see instead of putting just 2 chunks of the hydrangea in, how I've taken that and brought your eye from one side of the composition all the way through the delphinium and brought it to the opposite side as well. Now, as we look at our color palette here, Our blue is fairly strong in color. So if I were to take blue and put it with blue, it's going to look very heavy on that one side. So I want to create rhythm in the composition so our eye travels throughout the whole presentation. So I'm actually going to put the blue hydrangea deep on the opposite side. So now our blue carries over, but we don't want it to jump. We want it to easily move the eye from one location to the other. So I'm actually going to let that blue pull through. Let me turn this around so you can get the idea that now the blue that was here drops your eye and then brings it back around onto the opposite side. And if you were paying attention, you saw that I cut some leaves off of there. Hairpin, insert. Wow, that covered up a great deal of the floral foam. I'm gonna do it again. Take that stem, hairpin, and bring that over. Now you can see why I didn't cover the entire surface with my moss at the very beginning. I love the dimension by adding this violet tone in here. And you know, hydrangeas are still a favorite flower, so we might as well capitalize on that and use those in a very cost-effective way. And I like the violet against the lavender. It gives us some contrast of color, light to dark. Tints, tones, and shades are what we're talking about here. Now as I turn this, you can see with each addition how it changes the character, how it changes and adds so much impact. All right, adding a little bit more as we go along here. This time I'm going to lighten up. And I'll turn this so you can see it. Oh, that looks so good with that kind of a gray blue, almost like a Dusty Miller type of a feel to it. And as I work on one side, I bring that color to the opposite side, whether it's in a large amount or a small amount. So I've got two here, one to what I'll call the back side or to the opposite side. Now as I look, I'm just about adding the rest. I want to add these beautiful cabbage roses. Again, very home decor. Ooh, I noticed, I want to show you my little boo-boo here. When I pin that garland on, I can see a stem there. So I want to make sure that I cut that stem so it's not visually showing. There we go, that's better. Now I'll move that back in place. So the cabbage roses that I'm adding in, peonies, hydrangea, all of these wonderful flowers that are available to us, whether it's home decor, whether it's event work. And here's something, I've yet to see a flower that goes straight up in the garden. So if I'm going to add that into the side, I want to make sure that the head of the flower bends up and grows to the light, so that that flower has a natural growth look to it. So you can see how it's struggling for the light. That ranunculus that we're seeing here, bending, and I just usually bend them before I even do the insertion. That way I know that they're going to grow the way that I want them to do. And let's add one more of the ranunculus here. Again, you can see that curvaceous look that's going on, and I want that to come above. I want that to almost join into, so this garden type of a feel is complete. Now those little leaves that I had earlier, I want to double check, make sure that there's nothing as far as showing of my mechanic. You can see without the greenery, I'm going to lift that up, tuck that in place, and that little bit of green just breaks that up right there. So now I think we're looking pretty good as far as our Refreshing Twilight is concerned. I love the fact that I can still see some moss onto the side. The eucalyptus, so easy to pin into place, ready to go. All of it just comes together. Fantastic look. Thank you, Pioneer Imports and Wholesale, for sharing these great colors with us.